Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 14 of the No Name Cinema Society. I am one of your hosts, Jonathan Betzler, and they say it takes a man confident in his masculinity to wear pink. Well, I'm doubling that up and say it takes a man extra confident in his masculinity to wear pink when discussing a boxing movie. And now I want to introduce to you two guys that have always been in my corner, starting on my far left, the amazing Drunk Davie back in his grandma's house. How you doing, Drunk Davie?
I'm doing all right.
And finally, J Money. Welcome.
Hey, how's it going, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls?
How's your... I just realized I need to turn off my fan. How's your week going?
It's hot. It's damn hot.
And what are you drinking today?
I've got some Rhode Island action, some Narragansett. What do you got?
I got some Dos Equis.
I feel like we are well representing the East Coast and West Coast of cheap beer.
Yeah, we're doing what we can. And ironically, Drunk Davie is not drinking anything, so that's you know the way it goes.
Not on Sunday.
Not on a Sunday. It's weird. That seems like the day that you would, but that's beside the point, especially in the summer. Anyway, I want to start off with an apology. We did have to reschedule this particular broadcast from earlier in the week. A few days. We were supposed to do it, I think, last Tuesday. But yeah. I want to, and mainly, I would not only apologize to the viewers, but also my colleagues here who had to rearrange their schedules. This one was on me. I wound up getting a job that was hard to turn down. But, you know, it wouldn't be an issue if we got paid for this. So if you want to send in your donations to the No Name Cinema Society, then that won't be an issue going forward. But I want to apologize to you guys for having to reschedule.
Well, happens.
Apology not accepted, JB. Sorry, no.
Well, I don't expect it from you because you have no soul. But
Right.
but Davy Joe, I appreciate you understanding. And Davy Joe's had his work issues come up in the past that have caused him rescheduling. So you can feel me, I believe.
I do.
That's
right?
correct.
You can understand? Your mind's in the gutter again, J Money.
Well, here we are at Sunday, so what else am I going to think about? Just you guys together.
Wow. All right. And so it starts.
Well, I mean, with that image, we're going to move up and talk about today's film, Southpaw, released on Friday, July 24th, directed by Antoine Fuqua. Southpaw is about a pro fighter at the top of his game when a sudden tragic event causes a chain of events that leads to him basically losing everything. So for our opening statements, now if that plot sounds familiar, I'm sure that's something that we're going to talk about. And because he's grinning, I'm going to go with Davy Joe first. What's your opening statement, my man?
Really good movie. Problems with the first act.
Ooh, I want to explore that further. Davy Joe, I feel like you're going to say something slightly different. I mean, sorry, J Money, you're going to say something slightly different.
I'm going to say fine, but pointless.
Ooh.
Pointless seems like strong. What I'm going to say is flawed, trite, but ultimately emotionally engaging, extremely so for me. But let's start with the first act for Davy Joe because I'm curious what his issues are there.
All right. So first thing I'd say is that I felt that the boxing in the first act was not it was kind of ridiculous and it didn't kind of live up to what you'd see later in the movie. It was just you know, it's the kind of fighting. It was even crazier than Rocky. I mean, it just didn't look real to me. You know, I can't wrap my brain around whether it was some of the supporting cast that wasn't as good or as strong, or whether it was that I had seen the whole first act in the trailers a million times. But it wasn't really until Forest Whitaker comes into the picture that I thought the movie really takes off.
I disagree with a lot of what you said, although it seems like we're more on board with the fight. I mean, I agree that the fight towards the end is significantly stronger. I don't know if that's where you're headed, but I also felt like it needed to be, and they needed to pull back from some of the early fights. I thought that was actually smart. for me, the strength of it was the emotional engagement, and I think, given that the script is so, retread territory that, especially from a boxing point of view, I feel like I've seen this story, actually even before Rocky. This feels like a story I've seen, a lot during the 40s and 50s, and so maybe Kurt Suter, the writer, felt like it was sort of a reboot in that regard. But I feel like the first act was crucially useful, and the thing that I liked most about it, the reason I think I was emotionally engaged was the performances. I'll start there. And an actor that I don't normally like, I found extremely engaging, and that was Rachel McAdams. And I feel like the first act was really important because she is a motivation for him for the rest of the film, and I felt that motivation. I felt she was strong enough of a character that I was able to sympathize and empathize with that motivation. So I feel like the building of that relationship was the key to the first act, and therefore the strength of the first act made the rest of the film work for me, because that was the really thing. Because the actual plot, because it was so retread, was not as interesting as like the emotion, and I think that comes from the performances. I've talked for a little bit too long, but I mean, based on what I was saying and Davey Joe was saying, J Money, where are you on that stuff?
Well, I think that mostly comes down to kind of things that you're saying about how this movie felt like a retread. To me, it was incredibly. Well, let me back up. When I said it was pointless, what I'm talking about is the fact that I felt like it added absolutely nothing to the genre that it's kind of within, and that it was, it's a movie that has some fine performances in it, certainly. I mean, I certainly didn't have any problem with the production of it necessarily, but ultimately, to me, there was really nothing engaging about it whatsoever. I think ultimately I was kind of bored by it. I mean, I will, speak to what you're talking about with the emotional qualities. There certainly is a lot of heartstring tugging in this movie, which I personally found to be kind of contrived and almost pandering. I really was very self-aware of what they were trying to do, and I think that's partly why I disengaged from it, because it felt so just, it felt like they were trying so hard to wrench some sort of bigger picture in this movie, and there really wasn't anything going for it.
Well, I anticipated that because you have no soul, so I mean, I fully expected that, because I mean, like, I agree with what you're saying. It's once again, like, I feel like I agree with the things, but we split at the emotional engagement part. Like, I feel like I was engaged in spite of the plot, and I am usually sensitive to over-sentimentality. Another boxing movie, $1 Million Baby, springs to mind, where I start to roll my eyes. I didn't feel that in this film, and I think it's the performances that make the difference for me, not so much the script or the direction. And I want to talk about the direction at some point later on. So I mean, like, it's funny because I agree, and yet we split where on that fine point, and it makes a big difference.
It does make a big difference, and there were definitely people that were in the theater that were really into it because they were talking a lot about how they were happy about what things that are happening. I didn't feel like the performances were in and of themselves incredibly special. I felt like the performances were fine. I felt like the performances were people who were good at doing their job, putting in effort, but ultimately there was nothing compelling about any of the characters to me. Ultimately, there was nothing compelling about the way that Gyllenhaal sort of plays his, down-on-the-luck, blue-collar, working-class dude. It was very cut and dry. It was almost very Hallmarkish to me. It wasn't like there was anything he was really bringing to it that was anything new that we hadn't seen anywhere else. That wasn't expected. I mean, ultimately for me, all the characters, nobody had any problem in terms of their delivery for me. It was just the fact that everything was so cut and dry and expected. And I just couldn't, beyond that.
Sounds like a script issue. When you say delivery, do you mean like actual dialogue delivery? Is that what you're referring to when you say delivery?
No, I mean their actual performances. I mean the way that they delivered in the movie themselves. I just felt like, I really didn't have any problem with any of the performances ultimately. And like I was saying before, I didn't have a problem necessarily even the way it was shot. I didn't have a problem with any production or anything like that. It just ultimately was a movie that I felt was kind of hollow for me. I don't know if it was just me in that aspect, but I was honestly bored through a lot of it.
I mean, and I can see how one might be. But I mean, like, and for me, I feel like that first act really got me engaged, and because, and the counterexample is a movie like Braveheart, a movie that people adore, where I was bored and didn't feel engaged because the Catherine McCormick character we spend like 2-3 minutes with before she reaches her fate,
Right.
and she is Braveheart's motivation, William Wallace's motivation for the next 3 hours.
Right.
And that wasn't earned.
Right.
I feel like here it was earned. I felt like that presence was,
I don't
even
know
though the role for Rachel McAdams is small.
I don't think I entirely agree with that, but I also feel like you're certainly right in your comparison to Braveheart. I think that I appreciated Rachel McAdams and what she was doing, and I appreciated what she brought to the performance in general. I just don't think that she had a lot to work with to begin with, unfortunately. And I felt like they kept harping on.
Well, I agree that that's what makes the performance. That's what makes the performance more impressive to me. And because I agree that there wasn't a lot to work with, and then the material was trite. I think that was one of the first words I used. So by elevating that, that's one of the litmus tests for me, is knowing that the character's flat and that someone creates something out of it. I mean, that to me is what a good performance makes a lot of the time. I think the three main leads, McAdams, Gyllenhaal, and Whitaker, are all really, really strong. Now, there's some performances I don't feel as good about, and I want to talk about that later. But where are you in this emotional engagement issue? Because it feels like that's where J Money and I really split. So, Davey Joe?
No, I'm with you. I thought I was emotionally engaged throughout the movie, and I really thought that the daughter I thought delivered a great performance, and it was a critical one, because if she didn't, it would have really, this movie would have sank.
Yeah, I wanted to talk about the daughter when I talked about direction, because she and 50 Cent are two people that I feel like gave inconsistent performances, and incomplete performances, and especially in the case of it. Now, 50 Cent, you can put a little bit on 50 Cent, but in the case of the girl, that is really on the director, and only because the girl's younger. The performances of minors, particularly those under 12 or 13, are really, really much more dependent on the director. And Antoine Fuqua, even though he has directed an Oscar-winning performance, has not, in the whole career, he hasn't really differentiated himself as a director, although he continues to work. His films aren't super widely admired, with the exception of maybe Training Day. And even then, Training Day seems to be a film that everyone sort of gives to Denzel Washington as the reason it's success, and not really the film direction. I feel like there's a lot of inconsistencies in the girl's performance. There's that one performance. There's this one moment when she slaps Jake Gyllenhaal a couple times. That is an outstanding work, and a testament to both Antoine Fuqua and the girl. But then she has some really awkward moments, like moments when she's watching the final fight, and things like that she's not working, and that's part of what there's a certain amount of inconsistency, and that falls on Antoine Fuqua. Like, he was not. It's his responsibility to help these actors, particularly the younger ones, navigate themselves through the arc of a performance. Like, he's the one that is seeing every little detail of the film go from A to B to C, and she seemed to struggle because it was awkward too, because there's a lot of emotion going on. Because I can understand her, like, they portrayed her as really being interested and wanting to be at the fight, but then they wanted to balance it out with this idea that she didn't want her dad to get hurt type thing, and that's complicated, and I don't think he was much help to her. And there's some other things regarding the direction I want to talk about as well, but I'll let you guys respond to that first. J Money?
Well, I guess what I would say is that, we're sort of skipping around the major issue, which is really the script. We're talking about how everybody's performances kind of elevate the material. I don't actually agree with that necessarily. But we're all sort of giving everyone a free pass because we're saying the performances are the thing that carries this movie, whereas the script is the thing that's fallen flat. And I think that that's really kind of a bigger issue. I think that maybe we should talk about why this movie is being drugged down by it. None of us seem to be happy with it. Maybe.
Well, I don't seem to mind the individual dialogue. It's really story structure, and not even structure, but the actual plot elements if it were a short story without, I mean, like, like it could be a boring short story.
Well, it's just that everything seemed.
But a lot of what.
Sorry, go ahead.
What's that?
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
So I mean, like, I think that it was all the other elements that helped elevate it. So I mean, like, I think that, when it comes to the script, I mean, I don't mind. I just feel like the film has been done before. You know what I mean? So it didn't feel fresh or original.
Yes,
but it felt fairly well executed with some flaws otherwise.
But if everything was completely.
Does that make sense?
But everything was completely derivative. I mean, if we're saying the same thing, and we're saying that.
I think I basically just said that in the different words, but yeah, no, I agree with that.
Well, so I mean, I guess.
But I mean, like, there's nothing about. But there's nothing about, like, I mean, I thought there were individual scenes that were pretty decent. I thought there was some good dialogue. I mean, so in terms of, like, actual screenwriting, I don't have as much issue with the screenplay as I do the story. Do you understand the difference?
Yeah, but I guess I would say that they were both. For me personally, they were both kind of lacking, but fine. All
right, so what's wrong with the screenplay itself? That's not related to the plot?
I just felt like there was a lot of hollowness in the characters. I didn't really. I guess what I would say is that everything about the characters, all the affectation that the characters had, which there was a lot of it because that's really all there was to them, felt, again, very contrived. It felt like they were all playing characters as opposed to being characters to me. It felt like they were all pegs in a line that were just kind of getting nailed together because that's how this kind of storyline works. I mean, we're kind of saying the same thing. We're kind of saying that, the storylines were derivative, and so because of that, I'm saying there wasn't a lot of motivation for the script. There wasn't a lot of things that really could kind of fill out the scenes for me. All the talks, all the inspirational talks that we heard from Forest Whitaker, all the emotional talks that we heard from Jake Gyllenhaal between his wife and his daughter, those were all things that I just felt like I had seen a lot of before, just in general. I just didn't feel like there was anything really compelling about it.
I agree with that last statement, but I mean, it really seems that where we part is it didn't bother me. Those are, I mean, like,
Sure.
I bought in.
Sure.
You know what I mean? And if you don't buy in the beginning, you're lost the rest of the movie. And I bought in, whereas a movie like $1 Million Baby, I did not. A movie like Braveheart, I did not.
Sure.
But in this particular film, I bought in, and when I went back and tried to understand why did I buy into this movie and not others? Why was I, I'm a crier, I cried. Why was I crying? Why did I care? What made the difference? Because I feel like, to me, especially knowing behind the scenes things as much as I do, I mean, like, it's hard to be engaged in a film emotionally. Like, that's rare. And so I try to understand what makes a viewer emotionally engaged. And in this case, what made me engaged, it was the performances.
Well,
Maybe Joe, say something.
I agree completely, and I didn't actually cry, but I felt like I could see how you did at the end. It was exciting, and it was thrilling, and I think that the performances. I'm gonna say it. At this point, I think that there could be 2 Oscar nominations out of this movie for both Gyllenhaal and.
I thought so too, but I think that the buzz is more in line with J Money right now. The industry buzz seems to be down on this movie, so it seems like that seems unlikely. And also both Jake Gyllenhaal, like the theory is he in spite of his last 3 performances or 4 performances being outstanding. The theory is he's going to keep delivering and he'll eventually get his time type thing. But yeah, I feel like he's really grown as an actor since Brokeback. I mean, like, I was not a fan of him in Brokeback, his sole Oscar nomination. Yeah. But his last 4 films, being Prisoners, Enemies, Nightcrawler, and this, I think it's a great track. He's on a great track right now. 4 really good performances.
Yeah, absolutely. I would agree with that, definitely.
But Forest Whitaker.
I didn't actually hear what Davey just said.
He could be.
What did?
He could be a victim of his own success there. But Forest Whitaker also, I thought, was just fantastic. I thought that scene, the 2 of them when they're sitting against the ropes, there was a point where I just kind of sat back and was like, this is something to see.
For me, that entire scene, and we can't give this away or anything like that, but that entire scene seemed like it came out of left field, and it seemed like it was there purely put in to motivate characters' emotions. That's one of the reasons, again, why I just had a really hard time swallowing this stuff. I think, just jumping back to something you said earlier, JB, you were trying to figure out what it was about this movie that made you feel more emotionally connected than some other movies. And I think that's a valid thing to try to question it. And I think for me, thinking about this, the reason I didn't connect with it was because I just didn't feel like there was authenticity to it. That's all. I think it's whether or not you can believe. I mean, it's not just willing suspension of disbelief. It's whether or not you actually feel like there's an authenticity.
And that's where I disagree. I mean, I certainly disagree with that statement. And that's probably the bottom line.
You disagree with
for us. I mean, I did want to. I mean, sorry, go ahead, Jay Mike.
You disagree with the idea of connecting with authenticity, or you disagree with the fact that there wasn't authenticity to this movie?
I disagree. I did feel like it was authentic in terms of the execution, in terms of the performances, in terms of the scenes felt honest and real. So yes, I mean, I did feel authenticity. The word you used was authenticity, and I did feel that. I mean,
yes,
but that's
okay. Sure, but you agree that authenticity is the thing that connects you on an emotional level to movies in general, right?
For me, generally speaking, yes. But I mean, I did like I bought in at the beginning. Like I felt like they were well established enough that I was not skeptical in that way.
Sure.
So we've got less than 2 minutes. Sorry, Jay Money, what was that?
No, yeah.
Keep cutting you off, but
no, it's good. It's good.
We've got less than 2 minutes, so I've got two other things that I was going to bring up in our final couple minutes, but just to see what you guys, maybe you could pick one. I wanted to talk about the editing and the score. Do you have a preference?
I'll go with the editing.
Yeah, editing. Go.
All right. It's a shame because the score was the final score done by the late James Horner, but that's something maybe we can talk about another time. The editing was another one of the inconsistencies, and maybe this is one of the issues. Now I don't know how much this affected J Money's enjoyment, and maybe it did, but there was just a lot of sloppy editing. Like the montages, for example, those training montages seem very trite, and I wish they'd done a little bit more things original with that. The boxing matches individually, I thought were really strong. As our timer goes off, so we have to talk soon. Wrap it up. There's even one scene that I thought was actually kind of interesting. Are you guys familiar with the 180-degree line?
As a concept,
in terms of
I guess so.
Yeah, as a concept.
Like where the camera is. Like.
Well, basically, it's about screen direction. Like, for example, if me and Jay Money are talking to each other in a scene,
right.
And I'm facing him and he's facing me.
Right.
If the camera starts over my left shoulder, then the reverse shot has to go over his right shoulder. You stay on this side of the 180-degree line. You don't flop to over here or this shoulder, because otherwise we're looking in the wrong directions. So in one scene, Forest Whitaker ties a rope across the boxing ring. Do you remember, as part of the training regiment?
Yeah.
And during that scene, as Forest Whitaker literally crosses the line, the camera does too, almost like knowingly that they were crossing a 180-degree line. I thought that was really and it's, if you watch the scene, like, you are sort of disoriented based on the screen direction, but it seems to fit with this idea that he's literally crossing the line. So I actually went with a DP friend to see the film, director of photography, and we both sort of caught that, and we thought that was funny. But that was that is the example I thought was like some sharp editing ideas. But then, like I talked about the montage, which Jay Money seemed to disagree with, seem to agree with, that they were sort of trite and done in a traditional manner. Even there was some in-scene editing that felt awkward and sloppy, and there were moments when Antoine Fuqua, I felt like was trying to force shots that were a little too artsy, like into scenes that didn't belong. So that was one of the inconsistencies. Very quickly, 1 minute. Do you guys have some thoughts on that?
It's funny. What I noticed during a lot of the fight scenes is that it was cut a lot, so that you didn't really necessarily see hits. You saw the impression of hits, but they also shot from below a lot, so that there was the scene itself was cut by the center line of the ring, like one of the middle ropes, which is often in the way of actual action. Which I feel like they were doing. They were obfuscating it because Gyllenhaal's not actually a boxer, so it just felt like to me like they were trying to as many tricks as possible to create all this tension and the sense of power, but it wasn't, obviously it was filmmaking. It wasn't like they were actually fighting. So.
Yeah, I mean, I've had some issues with the early fights, but then the last fight I thought was really well done, and they had some interesting POV things. That was sort of fresh as well. So yeah, up and down on the editing overall. Davey Joe, do you have any editing thoughts?
Just the scene with the rope I liked a lot, and I would actually I want to see the whole movie again, but that particular scene I'd like to watch that again.
All right, well, just to sum it up, it seems like I liked it the most. Davey's right behind me, and then way below us is J Money.
Way up.
I think we're tied, man. I really liked it.
Yeah.
Okay, well that's good. That's good.
I think Davey Joe liked it the most.
It's a rare agreement for Davey Joe and me. We're and J Money on the outside looking in. The hater comes back.
Well, that's how I saw this going down most weeks, truthfully.
That's how I saw it going down most weeks as well, but it hasn't worked out like that. So, all right, we got to go. We're going to be back in about 5 minutes with our Indie Spotlight, and I will reveal to you now that our Indie Spotlight is the 2014 Indie Obvious Child, starring the comedian actress Jenny Slate. That is going to be our Indie Spotlight for the evening. And next week's current film, and not next week, I think our next show is going to be August 11th. I don't think we worked out the time. I think we have it, 8:30 Eastern, 5:30 Pacific. I'll be back on the East Coast, so that'll be fun. 8:30 on August 11th, and we're going to be talking about, we're going back to the comic book world, Fantastic Four. Is that right, guys?
That is correct.
Davey Joe's excited.
I am pumped.
My brother refuses to see it, which is might be a bad sign. But anyway, but most importantly, now in 4 minutes, Obvious Child, our Indie Spotlight for tonight. See you soon.